Hello, Namibia, and welcome to your daily lunchtime show where we get to catch up on current events and headlines that are in the news as always. I am your host, Priska Nyolo, and thank you again once more for joining us here at NMH at 1. So let us first take a look at the incoming news this morning. The city of Windhoek has sent out a notification about an hour ago that the annual road resurfacing tender for Windhoek has been awarded to Tau Pele Namibia Construction Pty Ltd. The press release states that work will commence by mid-September 2020 and last until the end of March 2021. The release was signed off by Robert Kahimise, the city CEO, who the mayor of the town, Francina Kahungu, confirmed yesterday again is on his way out. And now on to more exciting news. To win a holiday discount voucher worth $1,000 Namibian, answer the tourism-related question that is displaying on your cell phone screen or computer screen right now. Now remember, you can win a voucher on the NMH at 1 show until the 6th of November 2020. This competition relates to the Namibia Tourism Expo, which will take place between the days of the 4th of November until the 7th of November. These vouchers will allow you to visit the NTE 2020, and you can trade it in for a booking of your choice at any of the exhibiting lodges and accommodation establishments. To remain fair, though, we will only allow one win per person, but this could still substantially cheapen your holiday if you think about it, because considering the fact that our Namibian establishments are likely to offer specials as part of their drive to promote local tourism. So moving on to today's question. What is your favorite destination in Namibia? You can simply tell us and then you'll find out exactly how easy it is to win. And now we move on to our COVID-19 update. Almost 75% or 3 in every 4 confirmed COVID-19 cases in Namibia have recovered. Today's monitor shows the remaining active cases per region as on Monday, 2 days ago. These were released by the Ministry of Health and Social Services yesterday afternoon. Irongo, previously the epicenter of the local outbreak, had only 59 persons left in isolation. In contrast, Windhoek still has 1,770 active cases. Regions with more than 100 active cases are Othrolanjupa with 156 and Karas with 135 cases. Active cases in the Oshana and Oshikoto regions stood at 13 and 83 respectively. This seems fairly favorable news, considering that the northern areas were supposed to turn into the next epicenter. To date, 416 healthcare workers have tested positive. On the graphic displayed here, you will see that these numbers appear in white for each region. In the Commerce region, where 275 health professionals were affected, that number comprises 66% or almost 2/3 of the total people said. Irongo recorded 55 positive cases. In the Hardap region, 16 healthcare workers contracted corona, while the number for Rundu stood at 15, 13 in Oshodanjupa region and 10 in the Oshana region. Of the care workers that have been adversely affected, 282 persons work at state facilities and 133 at private healthcare facilities. At this point, we would like to thank all of you that are healthcare professionals and other frontline staff in this crisis for your dedication and on your contributions as well that you have made to keep the rest of us safe. You are indeed our heroes during this COVID-19 pandemic, so thank you so much. And on that thankful and grateful note, let's go for a quick ad break and I'll be right back to introduce our video inserts for today. And for our first video clip for today, Mackenzie Nape of the Walvis Bay Community Association is of the opinion that poor development and poor housing in Walvis Bay needs to be blamed on politics. He made these remarks on Tuesday at the official launch of the association. Leandria Lair, so do have a look.
We came to realize and we took note of how development, the so-called development that is excluding the poor people, the poor residents, the communities, the establishments like where we are currently now, which is called Tudaleni, are results of politics, to say, because we have realized that politics has created loopholes in our societies. Politics is dividing our communities. Politics has divided our households. Even households are divided by politics because one or other members of the household is aligned politically different to a different political party. So we as a community association, we thought it is best to put politics aside and unite the community under the umbrellas of the Valves Bay Community Association. This is one of the main purposes of this association. It's to unite the community, put politics aside. Because we have realized that politics is more like a distraction, it's a dividing tool that divides the people in society so that we are not able to stand together and to work towards a common purpose and a common goal. And that is why we strive to unite the people. We strive to unite all people across race, color, religion, politics, and so on. And we have come to realize that whilst this political bickering, this division, this infighting in politics, and as a consequence of this infighting in politics, a result of that is also corruption. And corruption is one of the things that results into the poor becoming poorer. Most of our residents here in Valves Bay, as some of us who were born in this place, we know what the structures were like in Valves Bay. But what has happened over the years is that sheepins have mushroomed in this society. Ghettos, slums are being created by the political elite, the leaders that we have put in power, have created or give room for the growth of ghettos, what we call ghettos and shacks. And people, because they are in a state of hopelessness, and they are languishing in homelessness, poverty, hopelessness, and despair, have come to accept the shacks as their homes, which is not acceptable. Housing is a basic human need. And for us, we've come to realize that we cannot continue to live in shacks, especially in a town like Valves Bay, with its harsh environment, the winds, and the mist and all that what we have in this town. So these are the things, amongst others, that we aim to address. And with regards to housing, housing is a basic human need, and it remains a big concern in this town. The majority of the residents of Valves Bay are living in shacks, and they now call it home. This situation should change. Our politicians are doing nothing about it. Whilst we have individuals, certain individuals that we can also call by name, that owns more than 200 plots in Valves Bay, the rest of the residents, the poor who are left behind, are now told to pick up their shacks and move to the outskirts of Valves Bay, which is called the so-called Farm 37. These are the kinds of developments that negatively affecting, and it's not contributing towards the well-being of the community of Valves Bay. And we as a community association, we condemn these things. We condemn the treatment that the leaders give to the poor residents, the people who daily has to struggle to make ends meet, to put food on their tables. These are the people that we aim to unite and fight for, and we will continue doing that in this town of Valves Bay. And as a result of this homelessness, that people do not have homes, but they need a place to sleep, people go and grab land. I think when people grab land, it's not the people's problem. It is because the leaders are not able to provide land, housing, that people go and grab land. And then they are labeled as land grabbers. When these things happen, and when areas like the so-called Tololokas and the Tutalenis comes into being, it is because the leaders are not able to provide basic housing.
In our second video insert, Elizabeth Joseph did take stock during the last day of parliamentary voters registration. Long queues developed at one of the stations in Keetmanshoop. Similar to what was described by many voters in various stations all over the country, slow systems were the order of the day here too, according to the locals. who said that the time example days set aside for registration are unreasonably short, as most of them only finish work after 5 p.m.
So right now we're at one of the stations where civilians are registering for the supplementary elections. Today's the last day and people are still streaming to polling stations. Perhaps time has not been on their side and they are currently still waiting. It is a few minutes before gates and stations are supposed to be closed, but we still have a stream of civilians here in Keetmanshoop in the Karas region that are waiting to register.
Steffi Balsar spoke to Vernon Fineo of B Films Media. This is an SME which is supported through sorry about that, but is supported through a startup grant of 15,000 Namibian dollars. And it is an initiative from Startup Namibia, which is run and funded by the German development agency GIZ and the Ministry of Trade and Industries. The second round of grant applications ends today. Do take a look.
Good morning, Namibia. This is Vernon from B Films Media. I just basically would like to say we were supported by Startup Namibia with a SME survival grant. This grant was basically given out to SMEs who were struggling through the COVID-19 pandemic. So this grant was basically to help them with their daily operations and activities and basically help to survive the pandemic. Our company, B Films Media, specializes in video creation. So we do things such as video messages, stingers, and just general advertising for our clients. So this pandemic basically affected us like any other company in an adverse way. So which means our clients and demand fell, and we saw a bit of low income through the months, and it's still continuing. So we're currently trying to navigate through this pandemic like any other business. So we're implementing strategies to basically help us survive this period. And I'd like to say the grant was very helpful, which was given to us from Startup Namibia in connection with GIZ. Coincidentally, as we are speaking right now, there's also a second round of grants that they're giving out. So any other SME who's interested in applying for this grant, you can just check out their website and you could surely benefit from this grant if you are a successful applicant. The application process basically requires you to be a registered SME, so which means you have to be registered with BIPA, have your founding statement ready and check. If you have an SME certificate, it will be advantageous to you. And the grant is actually encouraging female entrepreneurs, I should say, yes. It's encouraging female entrepreneurs to apply for this grant to basically help you with your business operations. When we applied in the first round, the grant was worth a total amount of 15,000 Namibian dollars. This $15,000 was basically given to us in two installments, 7.5, which was at the end of May, and then the other 7.5 at the end of June. But currently this second round of applicants, or this second round that they're running, the payment is going to be a once-off payment. So if you are a successful applicant, you could get 15,000 once-off to help you with your daily operations and navigate through this global pandemic.
September is National Suicide Prevention Month, and on the 10th of September, the Ministry of Information hosted a panel of mental health professionals to discuss Namibia's worrying rate of suicide, as well as establishing how to help and what to do. One brave caller shared his story of how he survived suicide. Namibia has one of the highest rates of suicide in the world, and it is critical that people know that there is help if they do reach out. Yana Marie Smith submitted this footage from the MICT panel discussion.
I'm Yaku. So I'm a survivor of suicide. At the end of the day, we as persons need to understand it is a sickness, and it's not a thing that you can pass by. It's like you need to tell yourself, your body, all of yourself, your mind, everything, that I'm sick. And that's the acceptance that you need to get.
Suicide and mental health and depression is an illness. And I know people always say, depression is just in your head. It's in your brain. And our brain is a muscle. And you can actually see on differences in the suicidal brain compared to a healthy brain. And what it really is here the prefrontal cortex, which is our executive functioning. That muscle isn't working as well. And the muscle that is working really hard when you're depressed is your emotional muscle, the limbic system in the middle of your brain. That's got a six-pack. That's working out really hard. So people have to understand, and if you are suffering from this at home as well, you have to understand it. It is an illness, and your brain is a muscle. And the more that you are depressed, the more your brain is actually practicing that muscle. So get help to practice a different muscle of positivity, and don't feel bad. I think that's why a lot of people don't come for help, because we want to be so brave. We want to be so strong. But you have to understand that if you have an illness like diabetes or like heart issues, you get medication and you get help. And mental health is no different.
We need to stand up, all of us, as we have had the theme of this year is that working together in preventing suicide, whereby it seems we are not doing much maybe in terms of trying to curb this pandemic of suicide. Yeah, it's really a worrisome issue.
In Namibia, we have a loss of about 22 people per 100,000 a year. Comparing that to the global statistics, where they lose 11. So we're about double the global statistic. We fourth in Africa in terms of loss of life to suicide, and 11th in the world. And of course, we're also expecting that in 2020, considering the global pandemic, that we will be expecting a sharp incline in the numbers. The first thing we can do is, if you have a family member or you've got a colleague or a child who comes to talk to you about suicide, what most people do is they go like, don't talk like that. I think the first thing we have to do is we do have to validate what they're going through and say, I hear that is difficult. I hear that you've been struggling. So we need to give them the space to talk about their problems, and then ask them, well, what is your reasons? Why do you want to die? So allow them to offload without judgment. And then the last thing you want to do is really validate the fact that they have lived for so long. So say, tell me why you want to die, but also tell me what has been keeping you alive. As soon as you can, do get them help. We want to see an increase in help-seeking behavior to your social workers, your psychologists, your psychiatrists.
A very informative video insert indeed. And now for our last and final video for the day. Kenya Kambowe recorded APP Secretary General Vincent Kanyetu, who addressed the media this morning. Listen to what he had to say.
Looking at the previous days, we as a party, I remember vividly our Vice President, when he made a statement in Parliament, he said he was speaking during the 2020-2021 budget debates in Parliament. He commended government on its response and measures that the government has taken to address the pandemic then. We as a party still appreciate measures taken up to now by the state, but going further, after thorough review of the past 6 months, we believe that now is the time to lift some of the measures in order to allow full socio-economic activities to continue under the new normal, of course. While the state of emergency countrywide can continue, we believe that the whole country must open up in terms of movements. All lockdown measures must be lifted. The curfew must be abolished. We must continue with the WHO protocols of mandatory of wearing masks in public, social distancing, regular sanitizing, and for those who are in the most vulnerable group to stay or work from home when necessary and avoid unnecessary travels and bigger crowds. We do this recommendation very conscious of the negative impact and uphold suffering which the pandemic have brought to bear on all our people at large and informal economy and the Namibian SME sector. We are sure you will also agree with us that it is only the big guys in the economy, mostly the foreign, particularly in Namibia, the South African dominated foreign companies that are now making business via their supermarkets, and which some extent has been benefiting from the lockdown and the curfew measures at the expense of the most local businesses and informal traders. We are prepared to forge ahead and cooperate under the new normal until we as a nation defeat the invisible enemy COVID-19. Let us all cooperate and contribute to the fight in our own small ways. Together we can overcome coronavirus.
And that is a quick wrap up of the video inserts that we have for you today. Let us go for another quick ad break, but I'll be right back as we jump into the front pages of our newspaper dailies today. And now we take a look at the front pages of our daily newspapers today. The Allgemeine Zeitung leads on its front page with a story about city of Windhoek, having announced that they will attempt to decongest Windhoek's informal settlements. It is, however, all a little confusing as neither the town council nor the Minister of Urban and Rural Development seem to have put aside funds to actually turn this into a properly organized initiative. It seems as though people could end up being taken from one side to the next, only to find that they still will not have access to municipal services, although the mayor, Francina Kahungu, assured journalist Steffi Balsa that most of the areas have already been serviced. In the meantime, all informal settlements are considered to be collection points, or what is termed reception areas, for people in need to be relocated, but the mayor did not elaborate further about what that means exactly. Page 1, the Republican leads with two men who, according to a police report, broke into a home during Monday morning and subsequently, apart from stealing, also ended up raping the 12-year-old daughter in the presence of her mother, aged 32, and her 8-year-old sister. This story once again came as a great shock to the Namibian community, with the Minister of Justice, Yvonne Dauseb, having expressed her opinion that this is sadly a type of community Namibians are turning into. Having reported yesterday about Magistrate Vanessa Stanley having given the state prosecution and the Anti-Corruption Commission 3 months to finish their investigations into the fish rod case, the Namibian Sun today on its page 1 leads with the ACC having indicated that they will be able to meet that deadline. This follows public fear and opposing sentiment that the so-called Fish Rod 7 example, the previous Minister of Fisheries, Bernard Esau, as well as the previous Minister of Justice, Saki Shangala, and 5 further business personalities would end up being released on bail. The Namibian's front page informs the reader of the fact that the liquidators of the SME bank are now demanding previous employees of the bank to make arrangements so as to pay back loans that had been granted to the 60 former staff members. New Era's lead article today revolves around the Basic Income Grant that was revived by the Basic Income Grant Coalition of Namibia Tuesday last week. It has to do with the so-called BIG, that should ideally amount to 5,000 Namibian dollars per month for all people who do not earn a fixed income or live below the poverty line. Let's go for another quick ad break, and I'll be right back with the inside pages of today's daily newspapers. And now we move on to the inside pages of our daily newspapers. On its page 3, the Allgemeine Zeitung focuses on a leopard attack. This has also been covered by many of the other papers and revolves around 3 goat herders having been injured by a leopard when they tried to save their animals near the Spitzkoppe Mountains in the Erongo region. The Republican has an interesting article on page 3. It would seem as though Namibia is regarded as the third most ecologically endangered country of the world, according to a report by the Institute for Economics and Peace. Food security, drought, water shortages, dwindling natural resources, and climate change are the 5 most serious challenges which Namibia faces, according to the report. Having reported about the fish rot case on page 1, the Namibian Sun looks at another angle on page 3, where you can read up about the board of the National Fishing Corporation of Namibia, generally known as Fishcore, which is currently contemplating the future employment of its suspended CEO, Mike Ngipunya, who is one of the people involved in the fish rot scandal. A recent bid by Ngipunya to be released on bail was turned down by the magistrate's court. On its page 3, the Namibian focuses on an anti-corruption commission case. The commission has been accused of once again concentrating on petty cases rather than tackling more serious cases. This time they arrested Esther Ndilula, the marketing manager of Namibia Wildlife Resorts NWR, on account of her having apparently lied about her driver's license that had expired. The Director General Paulus Noah reckons that the ACC deals with all crimes, whether petty or high profile. The councillor of the Opua Urban Constituency, Wake Mupia, has insisted that SWAPO representatives should not be automatically be connected with the fish rot scandal. On its page 3, the New Era reports about Mupia having appealed to the voters in the run-up to the November elections that implicated SWAPO party members that they should be treated as individuals who did wrong. And now we move on to our interview insert for the day. In today's interview slot, Affirmative Repositioning Movement spokesperson Simon Amunime explains why government is being taken to court over failure to service 200,000 plots. He spoke to Ohone Tlage.
Good afternoon and welcome to NMH 1. My name is Ohone Tlage, and joining me in studio is Simon Amunime, who is the spokesperson of the Affirmative Repositioning Movement. Welcome to our studio, Simon.
No, thank you very much, and greetings to the viewers.
Yesterday you were appointed as the new spokesperson of the Affirmative Repositioning Movement. Congratulations on the appointment.
No, thank you very much.
Also yesterday, the Affirmative Repositioning Movement announced plans to take government to court on the Squatters Proclamation Act. Then we also heard about the agreement that was signed that government would deliver 200,000 plots. Just explain to us, why is government being taken to court over these two matters?
Okay, yes, the Affirmative Repositioning actually filed 3 court cases, 2 to the High Court and one to the Electoral Tribunal. Now, in relations to the two High Court cases, one is to do away with the Squatters Proclamation Act, which is an apartheid legislation. It was enacted in 1985 that prevent people from setting up their structures, even a hut, and so forth. It was actually an apartheid law that discriminated against black people. Earlier, I think if we follow very correctly, there was one of our activists that was arrested, activist Dimbulukani Nuyoma, who stood side by side with the poor people that were being evicted. So we still continue to use those apartheid laws even when we're an independent country. That's why now we have filed a case with the High Court of Namibia, so we declare that legislation as unconstitutional and it has no place in independent Namibia. The second case is in relations to the 200,000 plots. In July 2015, the affirmative repositioning had an agreement with government, and particularly led by the head of state, His Excellency Dr. Hage Geingob, where they agreed, obviously a written agreement, that they are going to service 200,000 plots countrywide. So it's 5 years now that agreement is not on us. They've breached the agreement, and that's why we are compelling them so that they are able to keep to their promise and service those 200,000 plots. So far, they've serviced less than 15,000 plots, which we feel it's 5 years down the line from 2015 to 2020, and we only have serviced less than 15,000. So it's on that basis that we want to summon them to the court of law, so at least they are ordered to rather speed up the process or make sure that those 200,000 plots, because it's an agreement, it's a binding, so it's a role of government that they are able, because you must know that we called off a program, the radical program of action, where activists across the country were going to occupy a vacant land in all urban areas. So that program was initiated to say that people are homeless, land is not available, young people can't afford. So then that program was called off in good faith to say that we are going to negotiate with government. And that agreement was signed, but until today, government have been reluctant to honor the terms and conditions of that agreement. That's why the respondent is going to be the head of state as well as government as a whole, at least to be ordered. If not, at least this year, they'll be given 2 years in front to make sure that we speed up the process in terms of servicing the 200,000 plots.
Is there any target that is being, if in this 2 year phase, is there any target that you're giving to government to say, service at least X amount, X number of plots, or else we are going to continue with this action?
Yeah, you see, that's why we want to involve the court aspects, because you must remember that we went to State House, an agreement was signed with the head of states. We've given them 5 years, 24 July 2015 to 2020. 5 years, they haven't done anything. So the things of either going into agreement with them, I don't think will be very necessary to us anymore, because they've proven to us that they don't take those things serious. That's why we want them to approach the High Court, so they are ordered to do so. But we've given a provision to say at least give them another extra 2 years so that they keep up to their promise of servicing the 200,000 plot within the next 2 years. Failure to that is obviously, it's very clear. The program of action of occupying vacant land was called off in good faith that we are able to negotiate and agree. But if that's not able to happen, the problem remains the same. People are still landless, so we'll be left with no choice but to go back to our initial program of action of occupying vacant urban land in all urban areas.
And then you mentioned the electoral tribunal and taking the EC into the electoral tribunal. For the sake of the viewers, explain why is the Electoral Commission of Namibia being taken to a tribunal?
Yeah, you see, the Electoral Commission of Namibia is established by Act of Parliament. They have a responsibility and mandate to have continuous voters registration. Meaning voters registration must not be confined or reduced merely to a week or to a supplementary registration. according to the Act, it makes it very clear that it must be continuous. So it must not only happen during a certain period. That's why you have officers of ECN that are operating every day. They don't just operate during election. Those people get paid a lot of money. They have a big staff complement. So it was their duty to make sure that the voters registration is a continuous process. Just like when you are at university, you usually get a student card at registration, but it doesn't mean if you lose it, you wait for the next academic year to get registered. You can go any week, any month to get another one. So ECNF suspended that process. It doesn't happen. As a result, you get many people might be sick for that week that registration is taking place. Some might be in quarantine. Some might be locked outside certain localities. Then you miss an opportunity for you to participate in the democratic processes enshrined in the Constitution of the Republic that says that, look, Article 17 allows everyone to participate in political activities. Voting is your right. Then why don't we have this continuous process? So ECN have not really been serious in terms of implementing that provision. They usually give reasons of money not being enough, infrastructure and so forth, but it's an obligation, which is a constitutional obligation for them. So it's on that basis that we want to compel them so that they begin to allow. We have a situation of some activists that are sea workers. So they were in mandatory quarantine. Now they are going into the sea. So the time of voting, when they come out, the registration is not ongoing.
Yes.
They are unable to. We have children that turn only 18 today, but the voters registration closed yesterday. So we've denied them an opportunity for them to participate into the electoral process. Because if you remember, for the sea workers, and I think it's the security cluster, there's a provision during voting for them to vote earlier before any other person. So that, why don't we have that similar provision even for those people that are not able to do so, also to be able to register? But it's not only on that basis. It's also on the basis of COVID-19, given that there were state of emergency, there were curfews and a lot of regulations. So the electoral process where activists in various towns were collecting signatures, for example, for them to register association. This process was obviously hampered with, because one, you can't go to the clubs and talk to the young people and get their signature. You can't go to the churches. You can't go into the communities and call for gatherings. So it was difficult for this process. Hence us now saying that the ECN must reduce the 30-day notice that they usually require for gazetting. So when you collect this application and hand it in, you need a 30-day period for gazetting. Then now public objection for, so it's actually around 45 days. Now that period is not more enough. So it's something that is really disadvantaging these young people in various localities in terms of them participating in the November regional and local authority elections. So we've on various occasions wrote to ECN to say, look, amidst the COVID-19, it's not normal. We can't do those processes. So why don't you at least suspend or reduce that notice to say that, no, let's even reduce it to 10 days. It's just gazetting. They hand in the application, they're able to do so, then, but they've refused to do so, saying, no, they can't tamper with the act. It's an act of parliament. They have no power to do so. Then we begin now to ask them and say, but the same act tells you that you must have continuous voters registration, but you have ignored that. But that's what the act says. Secondly, is in terms of the elections in the Keetmanshoop, where we lost the councillor from the LPM, a political organization. The same act stipulates that if there's a vacancy, elections must be held with after that 90-day period.
Yes.
No, so they've decided to say no, after that 90-day period lapse, it's unnecessary to hold elections because the other elections will be coming. So those 2 or 3 weeks that are remaining, let's remain without a councillor, because it will put a huge financial burden on the Namibian citizens, because they have to fork out this money. But it's not about the money, it's about what the law says. So if they can't, if you are able to ignore that provision in your own act that says you must hold election in Keetmanshoop, but you are refusing to do so because of your own convenience and your excuses of money and expenditure and so forth. So then why do you ignore other aspects such as reducing the day? Because if obviously it says 90 days, but you are saying fine, there will only be a week or 2 weeks for us to go to another, we can't hold elections. Meaning, then you reserve the right also to say that let's reduce the 30 days to maybe 15 or 10, so we're able to allow, because obviously state of emergency, a lot of laws were suspended, rights for citizens and so forth. So it's on that basis that we are summoning them to the electoral tribunal.
Okay. And then I wanted to lastly ask on the land indigenization bill. Just give us a sense, what is the bill and what is the purpose of Special Envoy Benedict Law to the standing committee that will be dealing with the specific bill?
Okay, no, with regards to the land, the indigenization bill, it was actually a bill that we wrote as a movement and submitted it to Parliament through the Office of the Speaker in 2019, in March last year. Young people organized themselves, we marched, we went to Parliament and wrote and handed over this bill to the Speaker of Parliament. So the bill speaks about the regulation of the foreign ownership of land in the country. So the Article 16 of the Namibian Constitutions actually permits a parliament to enact laws that regulate the ownership of Namibian land by foreign nationals. So that's why we wrote and submitted that bill in terms of it to be discussed and so that they begin to regulate that process, because they failed. As we are currently speaking, that a lot of land, Namibian land, have evaporated into the hands of foreigners. Someone can come and buy 10 houses here in Windhoek North and rent them out to Namibians. So actually you are renting and sending money to someone who's a foreigner, but you are in your own land. So it's on that basis that we wrote that bill, anticipating that it's going to be scrutinized, it's going to be discussed, it's going to be critiqued, and make sure that at least it's passing to law that we regulate the ownership of land by foreign nationals. Because Parliament has failed, that provision is there in terms of Article 16 in the Namibian Constitution, but that never happened. But we are informed now it was tabled in Parliament by the Speaker. The latest development is that it was a push to the Parliament standing committees that deals with their constitutional affairs. Yeah, so that's where now the aspects of activist Benedict Law comes in as a special envoy on the indigenous land indigenous bill. So Master Benedict Law have been an activist of the affirmative repositioning for a while, ever since the inception of the movement. He was one of the activists that were negotiating the agreement that we're speaking about in relation to the 200,000 plots that was agreed by the president. But not only that, but he will be the focal person that will be leading all the AR processes in relation to that bill in Parliament. So his task will be in terms of consulting and meeting members of Parliament. Will be meeting stakeholders, political formation, civil societies, as well as having public consultation. So it's also to solicit support, because you must be able to understand that we are outside Parliament. We are not parliamentarians, but there's a provision for us to submit such bill. So his role will be to solicit support from MPs, from civil society organization and other stakeholders, and as well attend to those parliamentary standing meetings and so forth to represent the movement. But one of the good reasons that the Master activist Benedict Law was tasked specifically to deal with that bill is on the basis that is a student, actually was a student of the Cuban Revolution. He spent several years with the revolutionary leaders of the 26th July movement. He also was tasked earlier in the year to study the Cabral revolution on agrarian revolution and reform, and how then he can be able to get it and get it into the Namibian context, so we are able to implement it here in the country. The other thing is that the activist Benedict is studying agriculture at the Namibian University of Science and Technology. Will be completing his studies very soon. So it's one of the activists that is well equipped and capacitated to deal with the matter in relations to that bill when it comes to the land ownership in the country, particularly by those foreign nationals that want to own land in the country.
Thank you very much for joining us.
No, thank you very much.
Thank you for tuning in. Goodbye.